Another Middle-earth video, Tom. And it's a versus video. Why, count me in, good buddy. So, in the spirit of our Who Could Beat the Mountain videos, we're taking a crack at Durin's Bane, because it's only fair Tom gets to pick some topics now and then, and let's be honest, it's a pretty cool choice for a Who Can Win video, despite Tolkien's material being far more subjective and harder to quantify when it comes to fighting prowess and power. Before we get started, we do have one rule change and a disclaimer to lay down. The rule change is that when it came to the Mountain, we saw him more as a gatekeeper to the top tier fighters, and the best of Westeros should reasonably be expected to get out of the fight alive in a trial by combat to count as a true win. Durin's Bane, on the other hand, is a Balrog, and is comfortably in the very top of the food chain when it comes to combat and terrible power. At least before you start throwing the Valar, Lovecraftian beasts like Ungoliant, and basically God himself, Iluvatar, into the fray. So for this one, it's less who could kill the Balrog and live to tell the tale, though that will be a category, and more along the lines of who could just kill the Balrog at any cost. Death of the Balrog is basically the win condition, or this list would just have 2 or 3 entries. And the disclaimer, while Tolkien's world-building is just beyond legendary, he was often less grounded than George R.R. Martin when it came to fighting, and there's also irrefutable magic to consider that you can't really put into D&D-esque tiers or do true power scaling with. Middle-earth is more nuanced than that. He often had the underdogs winning epic duels they had no business winning, and kept things rather vague when it came to fight details, along with the martial prowess and magical abilities of his characters, with statements like Aragorn being the finest swordsman alive at the time very few and far between. You've got to remember that these books were written before geek culture and versus fights were a thing, and technology like computers and even telephones were considered devil magic by some.
But a more civilized age.
So if you disagree with our interpretation or picks, tell us why. We love debating it and would appreciate your insight. It's the only way we learn. Let's start with those who might get out of the fight alive. With our first pick at number 1, we have Sauron. Pretty obvious, eh? Even in his diminished state in the Third Age, Sauron is extremely formidable, with only Gandalf the White unrestrained and using the Mastered One Ring standing as someone who could face him on even ground. Despite being much weaker in the Third Age due to corruption and his power slowly, very slowly thanks to the One Ring, diminishing, Sauron still stands as the most formidable threat after Melkor, and sits alongside the highest orders of Maya, whereas the Balrogs were created from the lesser of these beings. Now, something to note is that Sauron likely wouldn't be able to actually best Durin's Bane in physical combat. Balrogs were basically made to destroy and kill in this manner, and they were very good at it, and Sauron's single combat showings when fighting those in his league, and sometimes even those below, are, shall we say, poor at best. However, even with the very loose explanations of how magic/divine power works in Middle-earth, it's pretty fair to say Sauron could straight up overpower Durin's Bane with his will, corrupted divine powers, and his unmatchable command of sorcery. With the One Ring and an undamaged form, come now, don't be silly, it's not even a fight. Next up, Gandalf. Just like our first ever Mountain video, this should be obvious, because our favourite wise old wizard, fuck off Dumbledore, actually killed Durin's Bane in the first place, though of course it cost him his life to do it in his grey form. We do however speculate that Gandalf the White might be one of the few on this list who might actually slay Durin's Bane and get out of the fight alive. Well, alive in the sense he remains in his physical body, the dude is immortal at the end of the day. Since Gandalf the White was allowed to embody a bit more of his inherent power after returning to life, and with how close run it was in his grey form, Gandalf the White should be able to smite the Balrog into oblivion. Having the Ring of Power Naya, also known as the Ring of Fire, also doesn't hurt his chances, depending on how you interpret its power over fire, especially when the opponent is half flames. At number 3, we have Saruman the White. Starting to see a pattern here, Tom. So much Maya on Maya violence in this video. So many assume Saruman to be a scheming weakling incapable of defending himself, seeing how he was killed in both the books and the films. However, it should be noted Saruman was killed in a pathetic manner after his fall. Now, I can't state this as fact because Tolkien is very vague about how divine power and magic functions in his works, and that's not unintentional. But it seems, at least in my opinion, power in Middle-earth isn't like mana in more generic fantasy where you cast spells and then need to wait for your mana to regenerate before you cast more. It's far more nuanced than that, and I can't really do it justice in this short segment. But to simplify it to an extreme degree, power is less a regenerating resource and more like a currency you can spend or fuel in a fuel tank. And that's not even quite right. But the idea is once it's gone, unless replenished by higher powers, who had cut Saruman off at this point. This also might explain why Gandalf first tries to scare the Balrog off with words, then uses a small show of force before realizing he has to throw the kitchen sink at it. He probably knew it would spend him beyond being of any use to the Fellowship. It's speculated Saruman spent a rather large portion of his power to enact domination onto his Orc/Uruk-hai army and into creating his own Ring of Power, which, despite the speculation that his efforts were to isolate it from Sauron's ring network and eventually challenge it, was still bound by Sauron's ring law. So once the army was destroyed, Saruman was a shambling wreck, which was further compounded after his staff was broken and the One Ring destroyed. The point I'm making here is don't underestimate a full power Saruman. He is incredibly formidable, with his devices driving off Sauron from Dol Guldur, although Sauron was admittedly in a very weak state at the time, on his belt of feats. Tolkien has a beautiful way with words. Devices doesn't necessarily mean actual physical devices. It could be interpreted as Saruman just using his power and his cunning to match the weak and Dark Lord. So pretty impressive. Another thing to note is that he was able to imprison Gandalf, someone who flipped the bird to all 9 Nazgul, including the Witch King, in a battle. The movie embellishes it as an epic wizard duel that Saruman wins, but the book gives no details on what actually took place. But a conflict like this is not off the table, as you need to be mighty powerful to hold Gandalf at all. With this in mind, you would expect a similar result to Gandalf the White, with an undiminished Saruman smiting the Balrog down. One last honourable mention in the Getting Out Alive tier is the Blue Wizards. We can only speculate because sod all is known about them. Even their names changed, but as Maya, they're at least in with a shot and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were great warriors. Before we continue, I just wanted to give an announcement about our Discord server. We're under no illusions that it won't be pretty quiet in there while we grow our channel, but if you do want to talk to us more directly or have video ideas to share or just want to shoot the breeze about your favorite fiction, feel free to stop by. Check the link out in the description below. We're now moving to the traders, basically characters who might be able to kill the Balrog, but it's almost certainly going to cost them their life. That Saruman section was a ramble. Best keep this one short, hey Tom. Our first pick is perfect for that because there is not much footage or art of him, and that is Glorfindel. Dude, much like Gandalf the Grey, killed a Balrog at the cost of his own life. Guy's an absolute badass, so yeah, he can probably take Durin's Bane with him. Short enough for you, that one, Tom. Our next trader is the Lady of Light, Galadriel, in her prime before her power had seriously diminished. Without a shred of a doubt, the mightiest elf remaining in Middle-earth during Lord of the Rings, and along with Glorfindel, the closest you're going to get to the power of a Maya, Galadriel, despite poor representation in the show that shall not be named, is not so nearly as stomped as many think. She was compared as an equal to Feanor himself and has some pretty bonkers showings of power. Even with her power and light ebbing away in the last battles of the War of the Ring, she was able to give Sauron, although admittedly ringless at the time, pause, driving away his minions indefinitely, with only the Dark Lord himself being capable of breaking her protection over Lorien. And after Sauron's defeat, she threw down the walls of Dol Guldur, which some interpret as her literally destroying the fortress stone by stone with magic. So, you know, she's pretty badass. Despite being a reputed swordswoman and looked upon more favourably than Sauron as a warrior, we think, like Sauron, Galadriel's battle with the Balrog would be one of sorcery, though she would need to sing a mighty powerful song to throw down Durin's Bane, and it would likely spend every last bit of her power and light to do so, as well as her life. Like Gandalf, she's also got a Ring of Power, which might give her some advantages against the Beast, depending on how you interpret Nenya's powers of preservation and concealment work. And our third and final trader is Radagast the Brown.
Do not speak to me of Radagast the Brown. He's a foolish fellow.
Don't laugh, Tom. While this filthy hippie is considered by many the weakest of the Astari, of which a large portion of blame for this can be levied at Mr. Jackson's vision of the character, the truth is we simply don't know what he was capable of, since his job was to attend the forests and nature more than it was to oppose Sauron. With that said, Radagast is still an Eru damn Maya, along with all the power, wisdom, and skill that entails. When it comes to fighting a Balrog, it's less a matter of martial skill anyway, and more a factor of strength of will and magic/divine power. Radagast might not be the mightiest wizard, but he is mighty nonetheless. He could do it. But since he is thought to be weaker than Gandalf, like his grey friend, it would also most certainly be at the cost of his own life. That does it for our traders. Finding beings who can actually fight and kill this thing enough to fill a video was really damn hard, so we're gonna polish off with a couple of Hail Marys. Now, we fully acknowledge these characters are going to get trounced 9 times out of 10, but since Tolkien's universe has a soft spot for the underdog, if the circumstances are just right, they might just might be able to pull off a fluke of the win if they go full-on kamikaze. Our first of these characters is a joint pick since they all hold the same strengths, and that is Aragorn, despite Gandalf's words, Isildur, and Elendil. The mightiest descendants of Elros, with the blood and power of kings running through them, wielding one of the greatest weapons in Middle-earth, would be more than a match for most foes. But against the Balrog, they are little more than a bit of piss in the sea when it comes to power. Some fans speculate that Narsil/Anduril has special powers that can give its wielder an edge over a Balrog, but while it's true Narsil has some exceptional properties, it's still basically just a sword. Its special power is more that it functions as an ID card for Aragorn's lineage.
It's the one that says bad motherfucker.
Alright, Tom, I'll elaborate a bit. The weapons of Middle-earth are not like generic fantasy weapons where they do +2 fire or frost damage or are super effective to orcs or ghosts. However, certain weapons are created with spells that make them harder to break or able to harm specific types of evil creatures that are otherwise immune to conventional weapons, or most famously to glow blue when orcs are around.
Not actually sure it is a sword. More of a letter opener, really.
Narsil was able to cut Sauron's flesh, so Tel'Shar definitely made it with the ability to harm a Maya's physical form. So it can hit and harm a Balrog for sure. But that's it. No edge, no special power, you've still got to somehow hit this fucking thing in conventional combat. So with this in mind, these three men have the means to kill Durin's Bane and likely have the strength of will to withstand its presence. Aragorn did after all try to run to Gandalf's aid, so he definitely wasn't afraid of it. But they're going to need absolutely everything to line up perfectly with a bit of divine miracle sprinkled in to actually bring the demon down with them. Our second Hail Mary and final pick of the vid is Elrond. Elrond is a bit of a lesser Galadriel. In all reality, his wisdom would lead to him gathering allies like Glorfindel and Galadriel to face the Balrog as a united front. But in a 1v1, he's very disadvantaged. His blood is diluted and thus so is his power. He's still bloody powerful nonetheless though. Like Galadriel and Gandalf, Elrond also possesses a ring of power that might give him a dog in the fight. Vilya was the greatest of the 3 rings of the elves and is speculated to be able to control certain elements like air and water. Don't think I need to explain why power over water might be handy against a creature that's 1/2 flames. Combined with his warrior prowess, Elrond might be able to bring Durin's Bane down if the circumstances are right. He's definitely got the best shot out of our 2 Hail Mary picks, that's for sure. A Balrog is a pure killing machine. It has no other purpose. Everyone that's fought one that we know of also died in the process, leading some fans to think it's actually impossible to kill them without trading your own life. But that's a theory that warrants its own video. They're a foe not to be underestimated is the point. With this in mind, who do you think could take down Durin's Bane? Let us know in the comments. We struggled like mad to make these picks, and that's with more than half of them doing a kamikaze in the process. So we'd love to hear your suggestions, maybe some characters from the Silmarillion. And if you enjoyed this video, why not check out our other Lord of the Rings video here, and our Who Could Defeat the Mountain series over here. And that's our take. What did we get right, what did we miss, and what did we get wrong? I'm sure you'll have no problem telling us. Thanks for watching, guys.